All right, welcome to App from Scratch, and today we are going to do JavaScript lessons for absolute beginners, people who has never programmed before. We'll try to make JavaScript easy to follow and also focusing on the fundamentals, so that way we can then use our knowledges of JavaScript to do the main modules that we'll do. So when we are talking about JavaScript here as well, we will not only talk about JavaScript, of course, we'll also talk about a little bit of CSS as well as a little bit of HTML to make sure that we have a well-rounded amount of knowledge that we need to do front-end programming. Now, the way that we're going to provide learning in App from Scratch is to have a compass, a goal, a North Star that we're going to try to hit. And we're going to use that for as a top-down motivation. So throughout our JavaScript sessions, we will try to develop more and more capabilities to get to that particular point. Okay, and for the JavaScript module, we're going to choose building a calculator. So this is a classic example of exercise that beginning developers, students use to learn programming languages. There are other possibility choices, but this is a pretty straightforward one. So we will start with this one. And we will not stop only at the regular calculators that people will be building. We'll be building beyond that. We'll be building some sort of customizable calculators that people can use to create, say, for example, a custom form that they want to use, they want to give to people, something like, say, BMI calculator. So that way we can build something and then people can say, hey, I want to put an equation here for BMI calculation, and they can just use that. Or another person may want to do a mortgage calculation, and they can use the same module for that purpose as well. So we'll try to get toward something with that level of capability, and we'll use that as the motivation for us to learn JavaScript. Now, so if we want to get started, one of the very first thing for basically anybody who wants to learn about any sort of programming language is that they need to try to write something really simple, write something that can basically do the simplest thing that you can do, so that way you know that your programming is working. And for programming, we call that the hello world exercise. So by the same token, we're going to do the hello exercises for JavaScript. We'll start with that. Okay. And what is very nice thing about JavaScript is that you basically have a programming language at your disposal with every browser. That for if you're not a developer, you probably don't know that you can basically write JavaScript into the browsers at any point in time, because your browser has JavaScript built in. So if we come to Chrome, and you probably missed what I did there earlier, let's do it again. Open up Chrome, right click on it, go to Inspect, and you have opened up the developer's tools in Chrome. And over here, if you click on Console, now this is a live JavaScript interpreter, and now we can type in, say, for example, hello world. Okay, so and it prints you back this hello world message, and this basically can qualify as the hello world exercises that people are doing for their learning the programming languages. Obviously, this doesn't necessarily teach us a lot just yet, but we'll spend quite a bit of time in the developer tools console that we'll use this to as a way for us to quickly verify our understanding of the code. Okay, so we type in hello world, and there's a few things here to kind of orient yourself. You can ignore other things for now. We'll go through them later, like elements, console, source, network, performance, memory, application, security audits. The most important one for us right now is just the console. And over here, there's basically something that a prompt, a little prompt cursor that's blinking. This is something that where you start gonna type in your JavaScript code. And right in front of it, there's this little thing here that says a greater than sign, and that's called the prompt. And basically, after the prompt, this is where you're typing in. And when you hit enter, so let's say if we type in the number 1, now when we hit enter key, we'll see that it gives you back a less than sign as well as just the number 1 again. So this is the output of the console that prints after it evaluates your program. It takes the input, what you have typed in, it evaluates it, and then it gives you back the result. And in programming, we call this interpretation. And we can go back to this information later, but just to keep that in mind, that you type in something, your programming language interprets it, and then it evaluates it and give you back the result, and then it prints out the result, and then it gives you the next prompt. You'll see this pattern a lot in the development tools that we will be working with. So just something to keep in mind, that this is called REPL. Stands for reads the input, and then eval, which evaluates your input, and then print the result, and then finally L, loop. So read REPL, read, eval, print, loop. Okay, we'll see this a lot, so just something to keep in mind for now. And in JavaScript, you can type in a bunch of different things. So for example, we type in 2 different things so far. We type in what's something called a string. So string starts with a double quote. This is a string, and it ends with a double quote. And there's also a different version of the string that starts with a single quote, and then you type in this is a string, and then close it out with a single quote as well. What you cannot do is you cannot type in this is a string and then try to close out with a double quote. The quotes, the type of the quotes needs to match in order for JavaScript to think it as a valid data that you're typing in. So, and you probably have also noticed so far, as for the things I'm typing in, the console in Chrome is very nice in the sense that you will try to see what are some of the other things that you already knows about that matches what you're typing in earlier. Okay, now if you just type in the number 1, it's going to give you back the answer 1. Now you can also then try to use this for running simple math equations. So 1 plus 1, that'll give us the answer of 2. 1 minus 1 will give us the answer of 0. 100 times 2 give us the answers of 200. Okay, so we've been looking at 2 different things so far. These are called numbers, okay, and these are called strings. Now, what happens if we type in this is a string but without the quotes? Then this string, when we type that in, then we will see the console give you something called an error. Okay, and basically in JavaScript and pretty much every single programming language, there are valid inputs and there are invalid inputs as well. And so when you type in something that's invalid, when JavaScript tries to interpret it, it's going to say, okay, this is wrong. And it can be wrong for multiple different type of reasons. The reasons that we're seeing here, it says uncaught syntax error, and which then it tells you says that it's an unexpected identifier. Okay, so in the front is the type of the error, and then afterwards is what is the specific reason for the type of errors that you're seeing. So it's saying that it's unexpected identifier. Okay, what does that mean? We don't know yet. So let's try another one. Let's just type hello world in here, and then without the quotes, and let's see what happens. And if we read it again, then it gives us exactly the same error. Uncaught syntax error, unexpected identifier again. Okay, So we don't know what that is, but let's see if we can create some of the other errors. By the way, as a developer, someone who wants to become a developer, you will run into a lot of errors. And that's not because you're gonna be making a lot of mistakes, which we will be, but you have to think of it this way. Errors are your friend, okay? The error tells you exactly what you're not doing right, so that way you have a chance to figure out how to fix it. And that's how we all get better. We get better by embracing errors. We embrace errors by studying exactly what that error is, and then go back to figure out what is that we're doing incorrectly, and then make the changes to it. So far, I've already created 3 different errors. Although we created 3 errors, but there's 2 different type of errors. So the last one I just did is typing in hello, but without the following world. And we see that now, instead of throwing the uncaught syntax error, it now throws the uncaught reference error. And then now it tells us hello is not defined. Okay, so what's the difference between the two? The difference between the two is this. Okay, in the second case, we're gonna talk about second case because this will be easier. Okay, hello is not something that JavaScript knows at this particular point in time because it has not yet been defined. Okay, so JavaScript does this. When you type in something that is surrounded by quotes, it's going to treat it as something called a string, which is a data type. And then if you type in just a number, it's going to treat it as a different data type called number. Okay. Now, but if you type in a word that is basically doesn't have any spaces in them, it's going to treat it as something called an identifier. And then, you can think there's multiple different ways to think about identifier. Another word that you can often hear is that it can be called a variable as well. Okay, you probably also have heard about people talking about you need to define variables, you need to define things like that. Yeah, a variable is what stores a particular set of data that you want to point to, but you need to give it a variable a name, and that name is called an identifier. So because we have not yet defined, there's no variable that is known by the JavaScript console at this time. And you can see right here, if I type in just H, it's going to give you a list of the things that the JavaScript console already knows. And then if I type in the next key, E, then so far there's one thing that it knows that starts with H and then followed by E, which is it's something called headers. If I then type in L, then we can see that there's nothing that it shows that starts with it except these 2, which were preceded by that the same prompt as we see. What this means is that it says that this is what you typed in before. So basically, the Chrome console tried to be helpful, saying, hey, did you try to type in something you previously typed in? So if that's the goal, then you come down here to do it, and you can once you select it, you'll complete that for you. But because this hasn't been defined, so it doesn't help us. And we know that it isn't defined because it didn't show up in any of the other predefined items, the ones that did not get preceded by the greater than sign, by the prompt, was called hello. Okay. So how do we fix that? We fix that by creating a variable, and then we call it hello. And then we can assign to something. We assign to the string hello world. Okay. Now it prints back the output is undefined. We'll cover undefined a little bit later. But now if we type in hello again, and we type in slowly, you can see that instead of just the ones that preceded by the prompt, hello now shows up as the first entry. What it means is that this particular console now knows there's a variable called hello, so that when you hit enter, it's going to print you back information of what you have previously defined before. Okay, so we will no longer run into the issue of we have solved this error, the error of uncaught reference error, because now hello is defined. So when you type in hello, it no longer prints out this error. But if we type in hello world, then we can still see this error again. It says uncaught syntax error, unexpected identifier. So, obviously that it would be hard to know why it throws you this until you understand a little bit about how JavaScript code is written. But for now, what you need to know is that in JavaScript, you cannot have two identifiers next to each other. Okay, let's just say that if we define the variable world, okay, let's just say that we cannot call world app from scratch. Okay, now both are defined. If I type in world, it will show up here, but if I type in hello world, it's still wrong. It still is a syntax error. The syntax error is this: in JavaScript, you cannot have you cannot have two identifiers follow each other like that. They need to have something in between. So for example, we can append them together by using the operator plus. Okay, so for string, when you use the operator plus, it appends the two strings together one after another. And because we did not define a space in between, so the world and the app don't have a space in between. Okay, and when it comes to programming, this is very exact. Okay, as users, as people, we think that, oh yeah, if we want to append two strings together, it should by default give you a space in between. So that way, because that's the way how we think about it. But in programming, it has to be exact. So you have to do something like this: hello plus a string with a single space, then do another plus, then type in world. So now we are adding three strings together, and now you can give us a space in between. So programming language is exact. It does exactly what you tell it to do, even if it's an invalid instruction. And if it's an invalid instruction, it will give you back an error, hopefully. Sometimes programs might have bugs and it doesn't give you back any error whatsoever. And those are actually bad. That's why I'm saying that the errors are your friends. Learn to embrace them. Learn to love them. Okay? So by just working with the console, you can actually learn quite a bit about JavaScript as well. But obviously that by just working, the console is a tool. It's a tool to allow you to experiment with your code. It's a tool that can give you back information of the code that you're running that basically shows you what the error is. But you're not really yet writing an actual code. What we want to do isn't to just work with the console, but we actually want to print something into the browser. So while we've been printing out the term hello world, but we technically have not yet finished our hello world exercises yet. Not until we have it show up in the browser, because your user is not going to try to run code in the console. Your user is going to try to hope that your code runs in the browser. Okay, so we'll do that. Let's open up your favorite editor. For me right now, my current favorite editor, I guess, is Visual Studio Code. It's a pretty good editor, and it's something that you can certainly work with. But it's not the only editor, so definitely feel free to try to choose any editors that you have. Okay. Now, what we will do here is that we'll try to create a folder, and we'll do the work inside that folder. Okay. And over here, we're going to create an HTML file. Oh, no, file not found. Oh, sorry, it's open. It's instead of the it's trying to open a file, but we don't have a file yet, so we need to just go and create one instead of trying to write it in there. So let's write an HTML file. Let's save it, and we'll save it into what we have just created here. And we will call this an HTML file. We'll save it as index.html. Now in a nice editor, you will do syntax highlighting, you will do tax, you do tab completion, you do IntelliSense like this. Okay, when you hit the less than sign, it's gonna say, okay, so what is that you're trying to do? Then you give you a bunch of different options. And what we want to do here is just to fill out the basic simple HTML pages. If you don't know HTML yet, don't worry, we will spend some time talking about HTML, but I'm going to assume that you probably have previously seen HTML. If you haven't, definitely let me know. Okay, this is my first JavaScript program. And what do we want to do here? We want to run a little script, and we'll put the code inside the script element. And in here, well, let's first do something different. Let's first write this out. Okay, this is my HTML page. Okay, so now we have this HTML file created. We're going to open it. Well, no folder open yet. Open folder. We'll open this folder. Select folder. And we'll reveal an Explorer. Now we'll go into there and try to run this. Open with Chrome. Okay, so now here's our first HTML page. Prints out the title on the top, and then it prints out the paragraph. Says this is my HTML page. And you can see that's what you're doing. If you can see for sure this is your page. If you just try to modify it, we'll make this, instead of using the paragraph tag, we'll use H1 tag, which will make it really, really big. Okay, now we're gonna then try to write our first JavaScript hello world example. So type in this document write H1. We'll stay with H1. This hello world. This is printed by my JavaScript code. Now, if we then come back here and then we refresh it, this is what happens. It adds this sentence in here. It says, hello world, this is printed by JavaScript code. And then gets followed by what we actually write down here first. Now, in programming, there's something called execution order. Okay, execution order means that some code are run before other code. Okay, so we'll try it this way. If we take this particular script block and then we move down, instead of putting in the head, we put it inside the body. Now, and we put it after H1. This is my HTML page. Let's see what happens. Save it again. Come back here. And we'll refresh it. Now you can see this gets printed after that. Okay. So basically, this is what happens. Actually, let's try one more one. Let's see what happens if we, instead of putting it there, we put it right in front of the HTML page. Let's see what happens. Okay. Yep, it shows the same way as the first time around, which prints this on the top and then puts this on the bottom. Okay, so depending on where you put it, if you put it in the head, it gets run before the body gets evaluated. If you put it inside the body, then it depends on where you run it. That then you might, then the evaluation order goes accordingly. So that is just something to keep in mind as you continue to write more code. You will have to pay attention to the evaluation order of the code if you want the code to do exactly what you're looking for. Okay, so with that said, we have finished our first hello world exercises, and from here on we will try to go from this point to where we will start building a calculator. So that will be subsequent lesson from here.